Merry Christmas, folks. I'm Greg Boyd, president of Renew, and I just wanted to wish you a Merry Christmas. It's been a great year at Renew. We've just seen the movement is going forward, this kingdom revolution that God is raising up in this world and that we're called to pour into and help shape. It's going very well. Exciting things are happening. And I want to thank all of you who have been supporting Renew. That's what makes this possible. So thank you very much. Merry Christmas. I thought I would offer a little Christmas reflection here, something to think about. And like any good Christmas message, let's start with philosophy. Ancient Greek philosophy in particular. If you go back to Thales, was considered one of the first great Greek philosophers, the 6th century BC. You'll find that the Greeks always were trying to explain the world, and the concept of God for them, this is a Christmas message you'll see here in a second, it functioned as an explanation. That's what the word God meant. It was a philosophical explanation for what they thought needed explaining. And going back to Thales, and you find this in Heraclitus and then Parmenides and Plato and all through the ancient Hellenistic tradition, they thought what needed explaining was contingency, things that could have been otherwise. You need to explain why they are the way they are. And so to explain that, you have to posit, they thought, something that's completely non-contingent, something that's altogether necessary. And that's what the word God meant, an altogether necessary being. They had to explain movement. And so they posited a reality that was totally unmoving. And that's what the word God meant. They needed to explain all change. And so they posited something that was totally changeless. That's what the word God meant. And so in the end, the basic conception of God in the whole Greek tradition was a being who's altogether necessary, who is completely unmoving, the unmoved mover. He moves all, but he himself is not moved. A God who's totally independent of the world, isn't affected by anything, because that would make him have contingency. A God who has no emotions and can never suffer. He's impassible. He's immutable. He's atemporal. That means he's not subject to time, because time would involve change. And this God's altogether unchanging. That's the Hellenistic view of God. The basic, and they had different nuances and stuff, of course, but that's the basic thing because they're trying to explain the world. Now, the Hebrews, they weren't trying to explain anything. They were just testifying to a reality. They bore witness to the living God. And so throughout the scripture, their concept of God isn't an explanation for anything. It's simply a personal living reality that they're interacting with. They bear witness to this living God who, you can't read the Bible but see that on every page he's changing. He has a plan. He changes it in response to people. He's interactive. He's affected deeply by things. He has strong emotions, and he suffers. Even in the Old Testament, we find God suffering, having grief, and all of this stuff. That tradition, the Hebraic tradition, culminates in the incarnation. The Christian story of Jesus, God becoming a human being, culminates this living personal God that we find already being borne witness to in the Old Testament. God is so living, so personal, so in love with this race of people that he was willing to become a little baby, take on human nature. The Word was made flesh. And if you start your conception of God with the person of Jesus Christ, the last thing you're going to come up with is a God who is utterly impassible, having no emotions, unchanging, immutable, atemporal, and all that. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. This is the ultimate expression of the living personal God. Now, what happened in Christian theology started very early on. You see the beginnings of it in the 2nd century with Justin Martyr. But theologians were impressed with the Hellenistic explanation, but they also believed in the Christian revelation. And so they just try to put them together, fuse them together. And then they cover over all the contradictions of this by calling it a mystery. Yes, God is impassible, but in such a way that in Jesus he can have emotions and suffer. And God is immutable, but in such a way that he can change. And God is atemporal, but in such a way that he's also in time. And they just kind of squish them all together and they call that a mystery. Or sometimes what would happen is they would say, well, all of the emotions of Jesus and the passion of Jesus, the sufferings of Jesus, the love of all of that pertains to his humanity, but not to his divinity. The divinity in Jesus is altogether immutable, impassible, atemporal, but the humanity is, well, that's where all the change and the emotions and suffering come from. Which means then that the man Jesus doesn't really reveal who God is. You put a wedge between his humanity and his divinity, so now he's not even the revelation of God. the thing is, the New Testament says that Jesus is not only a revelation of God, but the revelation of God. He is the Word, and not one of the words. He's the Word that was made flesh. He is the image of God, the perfect image of God. Hebrews 1 says he's the perfect reflection of God's very being, the radiance of his glory, and the expression of God's very essence, hypostasis, Hebrews 1:3. Colossians 2 says that the fullness of the Godhead dwelt in him. So he's not just revealing part of God. All that makes God God is found in the person of Jesus. That's why Jesus says, if you see me, you see the Father. And so I encourage us this Christmas, as you can contemplate and look on the little baby Jesus, know that you are looking on the living God, the personal God. This is what God really is like. Let all your definition of God, everything you think about God, be focused on Jesus, who all of his life manifested the character of God, and the ultimate reflection of God's character was found when he went to the cross and gave his life for us. This is anything but a God who cannot suffer. This is a God who's absolutely willing to suffer, the most nightmarish suffering possible, as he takes upon, all holy God takes upon our sin, and the God is perfectly united as Father, Son, and Spirit, experiences alienation from himself. This is the God who went to the furthest extreme possible, even becoming, in a sense, his own antithesis out of love for us. He couldn't have gone further than he went. The suffering couldn't have been greater than it was, and that's how it reveals a love that could not be greater than it is, a love that's utterly unimprovable. This is the living, personal God, the God revealed in Jesus Christ. God bless you. Have a Merry Christmas.